Actually going to move this over here.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to a special live edition of Pallet Side Chats. Good to have you with us today. We'll just wait maybe 30 seconds and let a few people join in. It's been a while. We're excited to kind of kick off this next series of content with a live edition. Alex isn't going to join us today. He's in the warehouse cooking up some pretty cool stuff with ShipHero hardware, which actually would probably be a great Pallet Side Chat episode down the road. So stay tuned for that. We have a lot of content to cover today, and I'm really excited about it. So I'm going to just quickly introduce our guest, JB Sauceda. It's good to have you, man. Good to connect in person, or virtually, I guess, in person. But JB's got a really cool backstory, and he's up to some really interesting stuff in the EOS world. So I'm going to get out of the way actually now and throw the conversation over to him.
Yeah, I think I'm going to move this camera. So when I'm checking in on things with y'all, I'm not looking like I'm not paying attention to everybody. So apologize for the quick motion sickness I'm giving everybody. But yeah, thanks for joining. I'm excited to be here. If you're just joining and have the ability to toss in, actually I will go back up here. If you have the ability to hop into the comments, one question that I have for everybody, I'd just love to have a better understanding of, is just the kind of general population of the people who are joining. So if you can hop in the chat and give me a sense of the name of your company, roughly how many employees you've got, and your title. So I have a sense of the audience and can kind of tailor some of the content that would be really helpful. But as far as today, we are connecting. I've had a long relationship with the folks at ShipHero. We've spent a lot of time working together over the years. And one of the things that has come up a lot has always been questions about the way that my company approached culture. And I always have to kind of point towards EOS as being the source of a lot of that success. And so we'll talk about that. Now, as far as the agenda today, let me go ahead and click over here. Let's see. So our agenda today is going to cover three main things. The first of which are the what and the why of EOS. Why does it exist? What is it, et cetera? Who am I and why am I hopefully a credible source of information about this? And lastly, what I've learned through the implementation of it at my businesses. So I'm going to go ahead and kick things off with the what and the why around EOS and dive into the background about me. Now,
Hey, JB,
EOS,
sorry, just one quick
yeah.
second, man. I don't think we're seeing the screen share on this
no?
stream. We just double check that.
Yeah, let me check. There we go. There we go. How's that?
Got it. Perfect.
Sweet. All right. Let's see. So as far as EOS, everything you're going to hear today was developed by a gentleman named Gino Wickman, who is a longtime entrepreneur, and developed this through some personal experiences that he had working with entrepreneurs and building businesses himself. Now, he started his career working with his family business, helping turn it around and ultimately selling it. And after that experience, started to work with a bunch of different companies and helping them getting more out of the businesses that they were building themselves up in the Detroit area. And as he was going through this experience, he started to identify some patterns with different companies. And he saw two major patterns, or two kind of groupings of businesses. The first of which are, companies that, are working, they're kind of successful in spite of themselves. They're working hard, putting in a lot of energy, maybe not always getting exactly what they want out of the company. And more often than not, it felt like the company was running the ownership as opposed to the ownership running the company. So pretty frustrating kind of way to operate. And then the second grouping of people that he interacted with were these companies that seemed to just be firing on all cylinders, had really great work-life balance. They knew where they wanted to go, and they were hammering, towards that vision and that view every single day. And so over the course of working with all of these different companies, he started to develop a holistic system that is now known as EOS that, ultimately helps companies from that first grouping of organizations make it into that second grouping, the ones that are successful. Because what he saw was that the vast majority of companies out there, kind of 19 out of every 20, were in the first group. They were surviving, might not be self-described as thriving, maybe really struggling to get that traction that they were looking for, and it really motivated him to kind of go help them out. And so he built this system that we now know as EOS. And it's really, I always tell people it's not like some kind of set of silver bullets. It's really just a lot of old school practices that he's seen develop in a lot of other companies. These, practices and tools are things that have been around for a long time. They'll be around for a long time in the future because they just work. But they're consistently seen at a lot of different organizations. Now, the reason that there's kind of a need for this is because another thing that he saw is that regardless of what type of company you are, almost every company out there and every entrepreneur is dealing with like 136 different problems at the same time. And the first type of company tends to deal with the symptoms of the problems, right? It's a lot of day-to-day stuff and just kind of stamping out fires, but you're still running from fire to fire. What Gino noticed was that all of the companies that were in that smaller group, the ones that seemed to have much more deliberate control over their companies, they had solved the root causes of those 136 problems and were able to move past them because they had systematically solved for them. And, were ultimately able to kind of rise above it and move on to the things that were unique to their business and unique to their industry. Now, since he developed that system, there are about 275,000 different companies around the world that are running on some form of EOS tools, either self-implementing or working with an implementer. There are about 830 of us implementers around the world that are, very well steeped and trained in the system and know how to work with companies like those on this call. And since the founding, there have been about 190,000 full day sessions. And so I share all that not to like brag about what EOS is. I share it to just kind of give you a sense that this isn't some sort of like woo-woo thing that just was developed overnight. This is like a tried and true, system, something that a lot of people use around the world. And what I love about it is that since the time that we implemented it at our company to now, the use and the vernacular is so much more pervasive that I'll talk to people all the time that are familiar with it, whether they're an entrepreneur or not. And I love that. Now, as far as who I am, I'll give you a little bit of background on, my credibility as it relates to this group. And I started as a commercial photographer in the brand space. It was not a very scalable business. You only really made money when you were working, shooting photos. It's great income, but it was very up and down. And so I started a clothing brand that turned out to be pretty successful and ultimately had to figure out fulfillment and shipping for myself. And as a result of that, started a 3PL called Sauceda Industries, which, hopefully maybe some of the folks on this call have heard of. Now, over the course of us building that business, we had a lot of successes, plenty of challenges that I'll get into in a minute as well. But some of the highlights are that, we actually helped launch the Shopify Fulfillment Network. Before that program went public, it was built out of our warehouse. Now, Aaron and I could probably give you a bunch of reasons why we think it ultimately in the long run wasn't successful. But early on, our culture and our approach to culture at our business was a big part of why Sauceda Industries was selected to partner with this much larger organization, in part because Shopify wanted to take the cultural approach that they had seen work so well in their software side of their business and inject that into the logistics industry. And they noticed that we were doing that in a big way, and they wanted to kind of draft off of that success. And so that was one of the highlights for me as we built the business. Now, we ultimately sold the company in 2021 to Cart.com, which is an e-commerce, venture-backed e-commerce startup based out of Houston that's done a bit of a roll-up, but it has a pretty big presence in the fulfillment space. And I'm still working in logistics. I ultimately left Cart last January. I spent some time working with the folks at Saltbox, as well as the team at Ordoro, which is based here in Austin, and still consult with a handful of different companies around the country. And one of my favorite EOS clients is a 3PL based on the West Coast that actually has a very similar origin story to mine. Now, I'll give you a little bit of context for kind of how big the company is and who we are and the context of what we were doing. The first of which is that by the time we sold the company, we were doing about 130,000 packages a month. We had about 150 employees. It was 120 full-time, 30 part-time / temps. We had a 126,000 square foot warehouse in South Austin. We were really close to all the great breweries and taco spots, so it was strategically located in a great spot. We had about 80 clients, about 55 of those were ours, and the remainder, and that kind of ebbed and flowed, were part of the Shopify fulfillment program. And lastly, and one of the more important crowning achievements for us was that we had a significantly higher than average employee net promoter score. And what that meant is that every year when we would do baseline surveys with our employees, including all of the warehouse workers, we would ask, would you suggest this job to other people? And mind you, this is a hot warehouse in Texas, right? It's humid, it's not air conditioned, and we would consistently have more promoters of our business than we would have detractors. Now, one little sidebar, and you might be wondering why there's a photo of Bill Murray, is that one of our key clients was William Murray Golf, which is Bill Murray's golf clothing brand. And in early 2020, before the world shut down, he came down and visited our warehouse, and I got to have a beer with him out in front of the building, which was a ton of fun. So I want to kind of zoom back though, because one of the things that I talk a lot about publicly is that, on social media, most of what you see is really just the highlight reel. You don't necessarily get the down and dirty that it takes to build a business. And so that's something I'm really passionate about trying to change. I think transparency and humility is really important and something that we should celebrate in an entrepreneurial space. And so I want to talk a little bit about where my business was in 2017 and ultimately why I'm here today. So we had about 17 people at that stage. We were in a 10,000 square foot warehouse. It was like this tin building, only a couple of clients, Haller Brothers and a few others. I had a lot of opportunity coming from the brand space. There were a ton of creative people building retail brands in Austin back then that were reaching out, interested in working with us as a 3PL. But I ultimately didn't know what it would take to keep growing, right? Like that 10,000 square foot warehouse was filling really quickly, and how I could punch through that next phase of growth was a total, mystery to me. And more importantly, I'd come back with these opportunities, right? Like I'm actually wearing one of my clients' Tecovas boots. I came back. I remember showing up to my warehouse and saying, "Hey guys, this really great direct-to-consumer brand wants us to ship cowboy boots. It's going to be killer. I'm super pumped because I think it's going to bring in more revenue and profit and ultimately improve all of their lives." And instead, they go home freaked out because they don't know how in the heck we're going to figure this problem of bringing this new client that clearly we have no room for into our business. And so there was this disconnect between like the vision that I had in my head and the life and the day-to-day experiences that my employees were having. Now, I also had this experience of knowing and seeing in the numbers that we were making money, but I couldn't understand like where it was going. It was hard for me to kind of track. And it felt like we were living management report to management report. And we only really knew how we did every 30 days, as opposed to kind of like every week, so that was another big challenge for me. Something that I'm sure a lot of people can kind of empathize with is this idea of superhero syndrome. It felt like a lot of the problems that were getting solved only got solved because I jumped into them personally. We weren't even really that big of a company, but it felt like, if we were out of toilet paper, I had to go to Walmart or, Home Depot or whatever to pick up the supplies. And that was just also not scalable, especially as I was trying to figure out and plan for the future. And lastly, there was a lot of subjective decision making, or what I called emotional decision making. I remember there being a day where there was somebody that I walked by every day, and I thought, like, man, this person's always sitting down. Like, it seems like we're busy as all get out, and this person is just like constantly sitting at a desk. Like, why aren't they up doing inventory work, and why aren't they working on this and that? And I brought it to my leadership team, and I said, what is wrong with this guy? We got to get rid of him. And I built this resentment in my head. And my leadership team, barked me down and basically said, you need to chill out, dude. Like, the reason that guy's on their computer so much is because they're doing like forensic analysis on the inventory to figure out what happened with these different SKUs. And so I started to recognize that I was making these emotional decisions without all of the correct information, which was not good. And so where did I go from there? Well, I was feeling really stuck. Profit was not where I wanted it to be. Our people, we had some success in bringing in good people, but I didn't know how to do that in a repeated way. I felt like our leadership team was hitting the ceiling and not necessarily solving these big complex problems. It felt like we kept rehashing the same thing over and over. And the rest of the company was getting really tired of me being the flavor of the month guy. I'd leave the work on a day-to-day basis. I'd pop in a podcast, some Tim Ferriss thing or how I built this or, my first million or whatever. And I'd listen to some, billionaire telling us how they scaled their business. And I'd bring some like little nugget that I pulled from that into the company and say, hey, this is going to be the solution to all of our problems. And, over and over and over, my wife, who was my business partner, and our other partner, Ross, would kind of roll their eyes because they knew that none of it really stuck. And I was trying to cobble together a bunch of different disparate pieces, which was just like hysterical. So thankfully, I had been in a peer group a little bit before this. I think in 2015, 16, I joined Entrepreneurs Organization, which I highly recommend for anyone that lives in a city where there is a chapter. EO has about, I think, like 17, 18,000 members around the world. EO is not related to EOS. Now, there's a wide adoption of EOS in the EO world, but they're not necessarily related. They just have similar acronyms. But I've been in EO for a long time, and I brought this problem to my EO forum. And as it turned out, some of these other companies that I was in a forum with were dealing with some similar challenges. Now, you look at this grouping of people. On the very far left, you've got someone who does software, inshoring. In the red shirt, you've got someone who had a printing company. In the other red shirt, a fine art handling company. You've got an attorney, a online head shop, and then a pool company, right? Very disparate businesses. But all of us had somehow been turned on to this concept of EOS, largely through a book that was, running, through EO like wildfire, which was Traction. And we all read it, and it felt like Gino Wickman had been reading my emails. He was describing all the same problems I was having. And I decided I've got to implement this. And so I burned through that book. I ended up reaching out. I found an implementer. I hired an implementer who came in, and they started working with us. And over the next 2 years, we implemented that system. Now, we ended up working with that implementer actually until we sold the company, which was about 4.5, almost 5 years later. But this person came in and helped us kind of get a grip on our company. Now, what does that mean in practice? Well, from 2017 to 2021, we basically doubled in revenue and scale every year. We were literally having to go out and get new warehouses and scale almost every year, which is pretty wild. We retained all of our great employees, and the subtext to this is that we got rid of the ones that weren't great, which is also really important. As a result, we became known for our culture, right? And in the middle of when Amazon started driving all of their labor costs up and making it really difficult for us to recruit, we were actually able to not have to compete on pay rate alone, which we had a hard time doing when Amazon was really driving up the cost of labor. We were able to compete on the fact that our business was just a more fun and enjoyable place to work, and had a clearer career path for people, including those in the warehouse, which was huge. Now, when we ultimately decided to sell the business in early 2021 and kind of opened our minds to it, one of the big sort of side benefits that I didn't really know when I implemented EOS was that it was a more marketable asset because, frankly, we had our stuff together. And so when Cart.com called us and said, we want to buy you and we need to be able to do it in 30 days, I didn't sweat it. And we were actually able to do all of our due diligence and close in 30 days on the nose because our back of house was so organized, and it was kind of wild. So more importantly, I slept better. I was a different person because I had a better handle on my business. I could, decide where we wanted it to go. And the crazy thing that I'll point out is I pulled this out because I still have my leadership manual from way back then. In 2017, we wrote down a bunch of when we went offsite and we did this work with our implementer. We had to close our eyes, and one of the steps that we went through was closing our eyes and describing where we needed to be in 3 years from that point. And back in 2017, at the very, very beginning of EOS, we already kind of started to know and had a sense for where the business needed to be to ultimately reach some of the goals that we'd established for ourselves. But what's wild is that I wrote that by December 31st, 2020, that we'd be doing 10 million in revenue, and that we'd have about 150 to 175 employees. We'd be in a 100,000 to 150,000 square foot warehouse. We would be, working on, some internal software tooling. We'd likely take investment from outside the company or potentially do some kind of merger. And we'd be on the path to securing our own building. And this was 2017. It wasn't like we knew and had some kind of crystal ball. But the important takeaway from this is that when we extricated ourselves from our business and went through a process and sat down and thought about what's it going to take for us to achieve our goals, we were actually more accurate at doing that than I thought. Because when we sold the company, we actually did 12 million that year. We had 120 full-time and 30 part-time employees. We were in that 126,000 square foot warehouse. And so we called our shot and we actually made it, which was incredible. And again, those first grouping of companies sometimes struggle with that. They have a hard time figuring out what they're going to do next week, let alone next year. And so EOS really helped us in a big way. Now, why? There are three main reasons that I really attribute to having the success with this. EOS, all of us implementers will tell you, we don't really care what system you pick. We just hope that you pick a system. You wouldn't want to run a warehouse with multiple WMSs. That'd be a nightmare. At various stages when we were working with Shopify, they asked us if we wanted to bring in these different pieces of software, and we were like, no, we're a ShipHero facility. We don't want to have 16 different teams doing 16 different processes. So we picked one. And what that allowed us to do was it allowed us to recruit really great people. And again, subtext, get rid of the people who were not great. We stuck with one system as a company, so everybody knew how we worked here at our business. And lastly, we held ourselves accountable. No more of this like the CEO gets to operate however they want because they've got a big personality. We all had a set of practices and rules that we were held accountable to. Now, I'm going to run through some of the tools a little bit quickly to kind of give you a sense of a really high level of how all this works. And the best way to do that is to kind of tell a story through the EOS model. Now, those 136 problems that I talked about at the very beginning of the session, all are symptoms of kind of like these different root issues, and they can kind of be collected to and organized as being a part of one of 6 core areas within the EOS model. Now, at the center of the model is your business, or in my case, my business, right? Sauceda Industries. And the first core area or key component of the model is vision, right? Where are you going? Where are you today? And what's it going to take to get to that vision in the future? The second key component is people. If you have a great vision, you need incredible people to help you achieve it. The third is once you have great people helping you achieve a vision, you have to understand how you're doing relative to that progress, right? You can't measure or you can't manage what you don't measure. Now, when you have really great people and really great data, and they're all marching in a direction towards a vision, you're going to start to have issues. The great thing about having good people paired with data is they start to surface the things that are both opportunities and challenges that you have to address. And so as an organization, you have to get good at doing that. Now, our fifth key component is process, right? You've got all the above. Now you have to understand how is it that we achieve the things that we do in a repeatable and scalable way. And that is steeped in this idea that all of our processes are documented in a way that we do them here at this company. And lastly, traction is opposite of vision, and that's not really a coincidence because vision without traction is hallucination. And traction is all about bringing this big vision that you have for the future, selling your business in the future, whatever that might look like, and bringing it down to what do I do today? What do I do in the next 90 days? And having that accountability to make sure that you're marching in that direction aggressively and on pace. Now, going through the model, I'm going to only talk about a few of the tools because we won't have the full time to touch everything today. I'm going to leave room for some questions, but I want to talk about some of the key ones. Now, one of my favorites, well, before I do that, actually, what I want to say is that the difference between the two companies that I talked about at the beginning, when we're going through this process of making people strong in the 6 key components of EOS, we always measure ourselves in a scientific but still subjective measurement of asking ourselves, where are we 0 to 100% in each of these 6 key components? And what Gino found, and we all find, is that typically these companies that are in that first grouping that are kind of all over the road are only performing at about 20% of strength. Our goal is actually to get you to 80%, to get you to 80% strong. Now, we know that 100% is ideal, but that's pie in the sky. Nobody's perfect. We're all made up of companies with a lot of moving parts and stuff. And so our biggest goal is to just get you from that 20 to the 80% strong. If you're in that 80, you are in the upper echelons of companies operationally. Now, how to do that is we employ a set of different tools, a handful of different tools. The first of which is answering what we like to organize into what's called the Vision Traction Organizer. If you don't take anything else from today's session, I highly recommend that you go to the EOS Worldwide website, read the traction book, and then try to answer these 8 questions on the VTO. And what the VTO does is gets everybody crystallized around a long-term vision and ensures everybody is sharing that same vision. So it's shared by all people at your company, which allows you to kind of step back and not have to be superhero all the time. Now, if you're 100% strong, it means that you can literally walk around your company and ask people, what are our long-term goals? What are our short-term, et cetera? And they know how to answer them. And organizing them into something simple like the VTO is a huge, huge step in the right direction, because more often than not, it's stored up in the CEO's head. Now, in the people component, the way that we do that is we try to identify who the right people are. We do that by answering questions about core values and what our core purposes are. And then we, on a quarterly basis, we're asking ourselves, do the people that exist here live up to the expectations of our core values? And if we actually assess them, are they above or below the bar? And if they're below the bar, why are we still keeping them around, right? Now, the second thing is asking ourselves regularly, do we have the right structure in place for our company? And we do that with a tool called the accountability chart, which is all about structure first and then adding the people second. And with the accountability chart, we're defining who is responsible for what, so you don't have multiple people responsible for the same thing. And it allows you to ask yourself a question about whether or not people want or have capacity for the jobs, because there's typically two types of people issues at most companies. There are instances where you have the right person, but they're in the wrong seat, right? There's someone who fits your culture, but it's either a seat that they just don't have the capacity for, or they don't have the understanding of. And you've got to kind of get to the root of that. Or the worst problem is that you've got somebody who's a terrible culture fit, they're a total jerk, but they're really good at their job. Those people, we've got to get good at rooting out, because these are those, there are a bunch of really not so nice terms out there for who these people are, but these can really undermine your culture. And we got exceptional at rooting those people out at our company and making it a great place to work. Now, once you're 100% strong in that, you've got right people, right seats, you're rocking and firing on all cylinders for the people component. Now, the data component is all about making sure that we're moving our decision making from subjective to objective, right? This quote I love because it's the tendency of a lot of CEOs to just kind of like bulldoze their way or kind of bulldoze over leadership teams and just make a decision based off of gut. Now, don't get me wrong, gut's great, but oftentimes you want to back it up with some data and understand like what are the trends of our business. And we do that in a really simple way with a tool that we call the scorecard. And it's really simple. Everybody at the company has measurables, and at every level of the business, we track those measurables every week. And we understand what the goals look like. So that way we understand whether or not we're on track or off track. We create accountabilities by assigning each of those numbers or numbers to different people. And then we look at them on a rolling 13-week basis, so we can kind of get a sense for where the company is at any given moment. And we're not just running from management report to management report. We really know, are we on track or off track on a weekly basis? Now, when everybody is looking at a scorecard and every person at your company has a measurable, you're 100% strong in that key component. And that's a really critical step. Now, that's kind of the meat and potatoes of our model. Jumping down a little further, once you're surfacing issues and opportunities, the way that one of the things that we think is really important is that great companies not only identify issues, they don't just bring them up and complain, but they also knock them down. And they do that in a weekly cadence using what we call the issue solving track and IDSing. Our process key component is all about identifying the 20% of processes at your company that drive 80% of your value. We don't want you to have to go document literally everything. We want you to document the things that make your company really, really unique. And then more importantly, not just documenting, but making sure that everybody at the company understands what those are. Because when you document your processes and you systemize the things that you know are going to happen, it allows you to work on the things that are really unique to your business and allow you to stand out. And so again, we're all in the 3PL and logistics space, right? Like we're all doing very similar businesses. The people and the way that we attack some of the problems in our warehouses are the things that make us unique and make companies want to work with us in the long term. Followed by all is this idea that you don't just like document this stuff and stick it into a binder that sits on your shelf, but you actually train against it and you measure people's performance against those things and ensure that everybody understands that this is the way that we do a thing. And this includes everything from how we hire all the way down to how we fire. and everything in between, how we do put away, how we do slotting, etc. At our company, one of our documented processes was how we did phone screens. And so during peak season, this time of year, about a month ago, when we would have been hiring like crazy, trying to get seasonal workers in, we had that process so dialed in and so well trained that our HR team of 2 weren't the only hiring managers that helped us bring in that wave of people. We could bring in associates from our warehouse and train them in an afternoon on how to do interviews and recruitment. And they could help us assess resumes. And we knew, that not only could they read a resume, but they could assess in an interview whether someone was a good fit or not. And so this is a real incredibly important part of the model. And lastly is traction. Now, traction, again, as I mentioned, is opposite vision, because it's important for all of us as leaders to be out in the world thinking about these big partnerships and these big pie in the sky ideas and where we're going in the long term. But sometimes you got to, get down onto the ground and ask yourselves, like, where are we today and what do we got to do here in the short term? And the way we do that is with a tool called Rocks. And Rocks are just 90-day goals. They take into account where we're going, both in 10 years, 3 years, and 1 year, and ask ourselves, like, what can we accomplish? What big thing can we accomplish this quarter? And hold ourselves accountable to moving the ball forward. I always, describe this as akin to cleaning out that junk drawer or, cleaning out your garage. There are all those problems or projects that you have at your house that you never tackle. But if you did them like a little bit at a time over the course of, 13 weeks, you're going to knock it out and go, I can't believe I didn't tackle this earlier. And so that's Rocks. But the easiest way to manage Rocks is to make sure that you're talking about them often. And the way that we do that is in a meeting pulse. We coach companies on finding the right cadence for everybody at their company to be meeting on a weekly basis to solve problems. And the way that we do that is by helping companies understand how important 90-day mindsets are, living on that kind of quarterly cadence, having those weekly meetings or biweekly, whatever makes sense for the various teams at your company to talk about the progress on the quarter. Ensuring that there's predictability and they're not jumping around all the time. So your companies and the people that work there understand that they have a venue to go solve problems and that they end on time. They don't drag out because they're good meetings and they have the same agenda. It's predictable. It's not always JB walking in and talking about whatever I got into that weekend. It's we're here to solve problems and we're going to do that collaboratively. Now, when you have Rocks and you're working on this 90-day cadence, you have a meeting every week that's helping you track progress for that, you're 100% strong. And so all of that in conjunction is the holistic approach to the EOS model. I covered a lot of ground, and this is just scratching the surface. Typically, when someone wants to explore EOS in more depth, we'll do what's called a 90-minute meeting with leadership teams, where we'll come in and we've got some questions that help us kind of assess fit for us as implementers and get a sense of where your business is. And then we dive into more depth about what different tools constitute each of the different key components, and we can kind of expand on what an implementation looks like. But I wanted to give a sense of what the model looked like, so that way I could tee up the Q&A section, because inevitably I was going to get some questions about my business and how we use it in practice there. And I wanted you to at least understand at a high level what the vernacular was, some of the terminology. And so that's the EOS model in a nutshell, in about as fast as I can give you the high level. And so just a couple takeaways before we jump into Q&A. They're the kind of key foundational tools, many of which you can download for free from the EOS Worldwide website, or the VTO, which I covered at the beginning, and is like basically the plan, where are we going? The accountability chart, which is who reports to who, or I'm sorry, who's responsible for what. Rocks, and what are those quarterly goals, and then meeting pulse and an idea for what that agenda looks like if you want to run one yourself. There's actually a great YouTube video that will kind of teach you how to have these L10 meetings on this meeting pulse. And then scorecard, which is just, are we measuring what we're managing? The additional resources, if you head over to eosworldwide.com, a lot of this is free. You can log in, download a lot of the resources there yourself to either do a self-implementation or just kind of get a high-level access to some of the PDFs that I shared, the paperwork and stuff that I showed you. The Traction Library is really valuable. There are a ton of different books, some of which are written for the entrepreneur, some of which are written for like the leadership team, to kind of give you a sense of how leadership teams work really well together when designed and planned for effectively. And then we even have books that are for the employee. If you decide that you want to implement this within your own company, you can give out to your employees so they can understand it and engage with it and create buy-in. All of there's plenty of videos and tools that you can download, which I love. There's a base camp that you can pay for access to in the event that you wanted to self-implement that has a lot more resources than are just available to the free users. And then there's plenty of access to EOS implementers, much like myself, all over the country. Many of us have different specialties and backgrounds that we can kind of share. Mine obviously is a mixture of brand, marketing, and logistics, but I work with companies. I'm agnostic to the backgrounds and the industries that they work with. I just, people reach out to me because of my background and the specific things that I bring to the table. Final thoughts that I have, parting wisdom, before we dive into Q&A and a little bit more of the nuts and bolts, are that I just hope that you choose a system. I don't really care what it is. I love EOS. I have a lot of experience with it, and I know that it works. I've seen it firsthand, and I love it. But if you're somebody who's cobbling together a bunch of different pieces, I know it'll be a lot harder for you to try to do that alone. I'm a big Lego guy. I love Legos. And I can't imagine trying to make one of these big 4,000 piece kits by pulling together a bunch of different ones. It's easier to buy the box and use that one and follow the instructions. Another thing that I'm really big on is peer groups. I know plenty of people in Vistage. I'm a huge fan of EO. If you're at a much higher revenue level, YPO is another great organization. But there are a lot of people out there working on a solo track. And if you lean on people who are paralleling a lot of the work that you're going through, there can be a lot of success. Chad Carlton, who I think might be on this call, runs a really great 3PL group that I've been a member of for a long time, and I'm still active in. I highly recommend you reach out to him. That's a great organization. It's very, very low frills, low kind of requirement to enter. It's just a peer group for us to share information about experiences within the logistics space or 3PL space. And but most importantly, the thing that I implore most entrepreneurs to try to do is get more of what you want. I mentioned earlier that I felt stuck in my business, and I think a lot of people start companies without realizing what they're going to get into. I'd only ever been a solopreneur for the first part of my career, which was about 10 years. And then I started this company and I loved it. I loved every moment of it. But there were plenty of instances where I felt stuck and like I wanted to go change careers or do something else, but I couldn't. I had this really great opportunity and this great business. And I think if I had figured some of this EOS stuff out earlier, it would have made it easier for me to have a better relationship with business. And I might not have wanted to kind of get out of it so quickly, in 2017, 2018. I thankfully changed my mind, and EOS helped me have a better relationship with my business. But I just, encourage most people out there who are, if this is your first or second time entrepreneurial activity, to be a little selfish and ask yourself, what do I want out of this business? And is it giving it to me? And for you to go seek that out, however you do, regardless. And so I'm here to be a resource. My big, this is my mantra, which is that, every business has a culture. Some just choose to actually manage theirs. And, in my case, we made that our product more than the warehouse racks or anything else. It was the culture that was ultimately the product. And I think that's why we had such a sticky relationship with so many companies. And so if that's an area that you have a lot of interest, I love to allow people to bend my ear about it. It doesn't even have to be about EOS. It can simply be a coffee or a beer or a Zoom to just kind of chat something out. I love talking about these things because it's really important to me, not just for entrepreneurs to have a better life, but also for employees to get to work at really great companies that I know many of y'all are building. So if I can help you do that and further build upon that success, I'd love to help you do that. So that's me. That's everything. And I'll drop the slides and open up for questions. I'm free for the next 20 minutes. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to jump in and answer those for anybody. So.
That's awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you. Ton of content. You did a great job getting through it in 40 minutes, almost 40 minutes. First question, can you maybe give some insight in terms of how you designed the scorecard that you guys used at Sauceda?
Yeah, so we had a handful of different KPIs that we tracked. The high level, probably most important one was how are we doing on SLAs, right? So service level agreement, performance. And so every week we measured that. We never claimed to be the best 3PL on the planet. Our whole thing was that we were the most flexible 3PL. So our minimum bar was 95% on time, and that was the brands that we worked with signed up for that in exchange for more flexibility around process. And so we measured SLA. We measured what else? I always had our finance team measure things like the amount of money that was overdue on receivables. So I think all of us, all the 3PL owners in here can probably, commiserate the frustration when you've got a brand who's maybe dragging out their terms a little bit, maybe going a little over their 30 days that they owe you an invoice for postage or whatever else. And so that was a big one, right? Like I didn't want to be caught with holding the bag with too many brands that were going too long without paying. So that was a number. We tracked things like our total package counts every week. And we would look at the relationship between package count and total hours worked. So, obviously I knew at the end of the month that my management report would give me a sense, for what my margin was going to look like. But for me to get a little spot check, I would basically pull every week, if our leadership team meeting was on a Wednesday, then we would have the operations leader pull in the Wednesday to Tuesday numbers for total hours worked and the total packages shipped. And they would look at that relationship and we just monitor the relationship between those data points. And so for everybody, it's a little bit different. One of the rule of thumbs that we kind of give everybody when they're thinking through scorecard is if I took you and your leadership team and I put them on a deserted island, and the only way that you could manage your business was by somebody pulling up on a rowboat and giving you a sheet of paper with like 10 to 15 numbers, what would those numbers be? And would they effectively, help you understand how your business was running and give feedback on what to change? And so that's kind of the high level exercise. But, we look at scorecards as kind of a living document, something that, some numbers make a lot of sense right now. And then over time, it may be something you drop off and you get good at, or it's tracked a layer below. But they kind of run the gamut, and it's really dependent upon what you as a leadership team find value in.
That's awesome. Then I guess a sub question on the scorecard theme from Noah. Any ideas for KPIs for 3PL account managers?
Oh, for account managers. Yeah, one that we used to do that was a little bit longer was we would actually track the retention rate after a certain set of time. And so, at our company, our account managers were also the people that we put in front of clients for sales and basically onboarding. And so if we were going to give you some kind of spiff for successfully closing a client, then we also wanted you to carry through to see their success on the backside, right? Like 3PL industry is notorious for closing deals on the sales side and then not necessarily living up to expectations on the back end. And so, so that was like a number that we would track. We would also track time to close for tickets. So we would analyze. We used Slack for all of our back and forth because our client count was small enough to account for that. And we would basically track the time from a request coming in to when it was closed, so we could kind of assess how successful we were in actually getting to the root problems. And so the flip side with KPIs, and this was something that we ran into with one of the 4PL networks that we were in, was that they did manage that, right? Like they used that number to kind of assess how they were doing, and it incentivized their customer service team to kick stuff over to us and list something as closed even though it might not actually be closed. And so we started over time, instead of tracking just time to close, time to completion or resolution. So there were different metrics that we would kind of start to use to triangulate the behavior that we were looking for
Nice.
in the operational environment.
I like that. Another question: What's the right size of company to start thinking about this?
So our typical ideal client, for a handful of different reasons, tends to be made up of leadership teams who are very open and honest and ready for change, and they're very entrepreneurial in nature, and they understand that they're going to have to put in some work. The companies that they run tend to be between about 10 and 250 employees. I was at about 17, about to breach about 20 when we started to implement. I've seen organizations do it at 100, 150. And I've had some leaders who are maybe on their second or third business and they've already used EOS, and they decide that they want to hire an implementer or self-implement when they only have 3 or 4. But the real sweet spot for us is about 10 to 250. because you've got a little bit more structure for us to kind of work through as we're working through answering some of those 8 questions and things like the accountability chart. And there's probably a trajectory of growth there that you're planning for and trying to work through. You know, timing wise, one piece of feedback that we'll sometimes get is that people, want to wait until they've built out their whole team. They'll say like, oh, I want to hire these people and then we're going to be ready. And the joke, and it's 100% true, is that it's kind of like cleaning your house before the house cleaners come over, right? So, why would you make your bed if they're going to come over and do that for you, and or probably do it better because they're going to wash the sheets before they make it.
Sure.
And so there's never what I would define as like a perfect time. The perfect time is today. If you're going to do it, don't wait. Having twice as many people only complicates things. It's better to kind of think about it on an ongoing basis, and as opposed to have to go back and clean up a lot of stuff.
Right. Awesome. And I think last question here, unless any other ones sneak in. Like obviously, there's an ideal way to do this, and probably an ideal process. But I think we all live in a world that's not ideal all the time. So what advice would you give to somebody who's maybe not ready to work with an implementer yet, but has access to all these self-serve tools, has access to traction? What guidance would you give them? I know you walked through kind of that wheel. Is that wheel sequential, or would you cherry pick something as a first foray into EOS?
I would start by reading Traction. I think that any number of the tools on their own are really great. But what I've seen over and over, and this includes myself, so I'll use my own, story as an example. In my company, when we would not use a component of the system, it felt like the system was less effective. And I think that's true regardless. It goes back to this concept of like bringing certain pieces in, right? Like it's a circle, and certain pieces are opposite one another because they complement one another, or they have a relationship with one another. And so my suggestion is, like, even if you're going to self-implement, which I highly recommend you doing if that's the approach you want to take, just commit. No behavior change is easy. If you've gone from never working out to suddenly deciding that you want to run a marathon, the first month or two, and I know this firsthand because I'm doing this myself, the first month or two is a little awkward, and you're like having to kind of figure it out and stick with it. And so, whether it's this system or any other system, if you don't use the whole thing and the way it's designed to work, it's going to be less effective. And so that's my biggest, suggestion, is to read the book, get bought in, ask a lot of questions. We're here to help. We really are just evangelists for this, and we want you to, be successful with it, regardless of how you engage with the software, or with the system itself. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. Noah, I see your question about the roadmap request for an EOS dashboard in ShipHero. I'll be sure to type that up for Joseph and send it to him after the call today. Very cool. Well, JB, thanks for your time and for sharing all this wisdom and insight. And it's super cool to hear founder stories like yours, and kind of get a peek at what happens behind the scenes as well. Because like you said, on social, we often see just the good stuff. It's interesting to see the nuts and bolts of what it takes to be successful. So thanks for that. Everybody that joined live, appreciate your time. JB, any closing thoughts from you before I end it off?
Follow me on X for all the hot takes on chili, logistics, and all the above. And and please, like I said, don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. We don't charge you just to have ask questions about EOS. We just love adoption, and we love more people being a part of the community. So happy to be a resource.
That's awesome. Well, can't end on a better note than that. So thank you all again. Appreciate you. Have a great day.
Thanks.